Montreal's Latin Quarter and the neighboring Quartier de Spectacle are a braided story of books, bohemia, commerce, and civic ambition. A portion of the city where learning, performance, and urban reinvention have repeatedly rewritten the streetscape. From Saint-Denis towards Place des Arts, the layers of history appear as a succession of stages, parish lots and merchants' houses, then lecture halls and printing presses, then theaters and late-night stages, and finally, an orchestrated cultural district shaped by municipal plans and festival calendars. The name Latin Quarter arrived in Montreal as an echo of Paris, places of study where Latin once marked the language of the academy. In Montreal, the label took hold in the early 20th century when technical schools and nascent university faculties clustered in the area, École Polytechnique and the Université de Montréal among them, lending the neighborhood an intellectual buzz that contrasted with the commercial core nearby. When the university relocated to Mount Royal in the 1940s, that institutional departure left an imprint. Buildings repurposed, populations shifted, and the Latin moniker lingered, even as the district reinvented itself. Decades later, the arrival of the Université du Québec à Montréal, UQAM, in the late 1960s, re-anchored higher education in the vicinity, grafting a new, younger energy onto the older academic identity. If the Latin Quarter carried the smell of ink and lecture halls, the neighboring Quartier de Spectacle furnished the energy of public performance. Long before the municipal branding that created that Quartier de Spectacle in the early 2000s, the streets between St. Catherine and Sherbrooke had earned a reputation as the city's entertainment strip. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, that zone hosted theaters, vaudeville halls, and cinemas. During America's Prohibition years, the city's nightlife only amplified this reputation. The 21st century project called Quartier de Spectacle did not invent cultural life there so much as consolidate it, an urban strategy to cluster venues, create public squares, and turn ephemeral festivals into a year-round engine for arts production and tourism. It aimed to hold together a choreography of stages and streets so that Montreal's festivals, whether jazz, comedy, or francophone song, would feel rooted in a single cultural spine. Place des Arts, the great concrete and glass complex, had already anchored the city's performing arts when planners imagined a broader cultural district. Later additions, such as La Grande Bibliothèque, which opened in the 2000s, altered the intellectual geography of the area by giving public culture a monumental home adjacent to the theaters and cafes. These institutions changed how people used the blocks. Daytime research and study kept a steady rhythm through the week, while nights and festival seasons filled the same streets with music, projection, and procession. Local entrepreneurs, impresarios, and performers have shaped neighborhood character in equal measure. Small publishers and independent bookstores nested near cafes, forming a print culture that fed the city's francophone literary life. Theater directors and club owners, those who booked late-night acts at places like the Metropolis or ran subterranean music venues, braided alternative scenes into the mainstream. These personalities often acted as custodians of place, protecting low-rent rehearsal spaces, arguing for municipal support, or resisting redevelopment impulses that threatened the social fabric. Over time, those battles between preservation and profit, between grassroots cultural production and commercial upscaling, became defining tensions in the quarter's evolution. The mid-century decades introduced new social dynamics. As universities and colleges consolidated, the student presence intensified, making cafes and small venues hubs of political conversation and artistic experimentation. The Quiet Revolution and other social currents of the 1960s and 1970s found echo in the Latin Quarter's murals, pamphlets, and late-night debates. Parallel to these cultural eruptions were less glamorous but essential changes: shifts in population, waves of immigration, and cycles of building vacancy and renovation. Together, these forces produced a neighborhood that felt perpetually in rehearsal, ready for a new play, a new issue of a journal, a new record release. The formal creation of the Quartier de Spectacle in the early 2000s represented a turning point. Municipal design and public funding reframed the district from a cluster of venues into an integrated cultural precinct. New public spaces were carved out, light installations and permanent urban furniture were added, and the city sought to harness the economic promise of festivals. This infrastructural ambition had multiple effects. On the positive side, it helped sustain major festivals and stabilize some cultural institutions. On the other, it accelerated property pressures and prompted debates about who benefits from cultural renewal. The visible amphitheaters and illuminated promenades are the most photogenic consequence of that policy. But the real story after the plan's adoption plays out in quieter places, in rehearsal rooms, artist studios, and the small businesses that either adapted or were displaced. Festivals bring international audiences and temporary economies, while daily life keeps the neighborhood rooted in local practice. That tension between the ephemeral largesse of festivals and the everyday work of cultural laborers gives the area its particular texture. Looking ahead, the Latin Quarter and Quartier de Spectacle continue to negotiate legacy and reinvention. Policy choices about public space, rent, and heritage conservation will shape whether the district remains generative for artists and small cultural entrepreneurs, or whether it becomes more homogeneous and commodified. The resilience of the quarter has always depended on a mix of municipal vision and grassroots ingenuity. Planners can build squares and light columns, but the theater company, the indie publisher, and the late-night sound technician keep the neighborhood alive. In that sense, Montreal's Latin Quarter and Quartier de Spectacle are less a fixed place than an ongoing performance, an urban text constantly revised by readers and actors. For anyone who cares about how cities turn memory into culture, this stretch of Montreal remains a rare laboratory, a place where the past is never entirely past, and where the next act is always waiting in the wings.
I hope you've enjoyed this video. This channel has more videos of Montreal in the Montreal playlist, which is linked in the description below the video. Channel also has more videos of my adventures bicycling through Latin America, Southeast Africa, Central and Eastern Europe, and I have playlists for all those countries that I've traveled through available on this same channel, of the Earth. So for more videos of Montreal and other cool places around the world, you can subscribe to the channel by clicking on the red subscribe button and clicking on the bell to be notified when new videos come out. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.